All right, so what we're going to do in this video is talk about just the basic interface of InDesign. And you can see there's a lot of similar things that are happening with Illustrator and some of the same tools that you'll see in Illustrator. But there's a lot that's different about kind of starting up and some really kind of some minor change things that only happen in InDesign. So I kind of want to give you just that brief overview of kind of just the basic tools and just getting started in InDesign. So the first thing is to create a new document is we're going to go File, New, Document, or Command N. And a couple things with this new document dialog. Just making sure that we are doing, whatever the size of your document is here, right? It's in inches. I have it default set to inches. If you haven't even touched this, it's probably set to pica, so just change that to inches. Number of pages, you can start with number of pages, or if you know what they are, or you can start with one. The big thing here is facing pages or not, and I'll show you what facing pages and not facing pages are. Your margins, as you go down here, you can set your margins for your page. So for example, let's say you don't need any margins inset, you can set those to 0. Bleed and slug, this is really important. Get in the habit of always adding 0.125 across the board for bleed. And I'll explain what bleed is in a second. Slug, I'll show you what it is, but it's not important. So I'm actually going to uncheck facing pages to start, and actually let's set this to 2 to show you the difference. So this is how it sets up. So you can see inside the pages palette, if that doesn't pop up immediately, it's over here on the side. And let me expand these out so you can see it. Right, pages palette, and it says page 1, page 2. And to simply navigate between the two, you just double click. Now I don't have anything on them, so you can't see them change and move. If I want to delete a page, click on it and just delete. If I want to add a page, go ahead and click on Create New. Fairly simple uses of it. So the bleed happens to be this red line that I just drew right here. And so what that is this will not print necessarily. This is what the printer cuts off in excess. So for example, if I draw a shape, give it a color, what's the outer edge here where this black line is the edge of the paper, not this purple line. This purple line is the margin that we set up. The reason for the margin is some places have what's called a live area, and a live area is inside of that margin. So for most places, the live area is right here, and this is the kind of the danger zone of where they don't want to print inside just because they can't guarantee that it will print 100% accurate. So a good way to tell you to see how this is going. So for example, I want this to go all the way across because I'm doing this blue shape at the top. I want to make sure it goes off the edge. If you hit W, you can actually see a live preview of what your page would look like when it's all cropped down and cut. Okay. So you can see if I want to go to page 2, I just double click. There's page 2. There's page 1, or page 2, page 1. Right? Fairly simple kind of moving around. Now I drew that rectangle without really showing you how to do it. Inside of InDesign, InDesign, you have two tools. You have a rectangular frame tool and a rectangle tool. Now, on face value, they do the exact same thing. The difference comes in, this has an X inside of it, and that does not. That's really it. Okay. Now, you're seeing my frame edges. That's not a blue stroke around it. That is actually just, you're seeing the frame edges. If you don't want to see those, you can go to View, Extras, Hide Frame Edges. And you can see these objects are still there. They're just hidden. So let's turn that back on so you can see these. So what's nice about the frame one is it has this X through it. So if you're kind of placing graphics, if you're kind of moving it around saying, I want my graphic to be here, it allows me to see that as a preview of that. That's the only difference. Stick with one, and that's it, right? I can colorize it. Let's use my swatches. Let's colorize it. And by the way, that's not the only swatches colors you can use. Let's move these swatches off to the side. If I decide I want to change my color, Make sure we're in CMYK. Add CMYK swatch. I like this color. Add CMYK swatch. Add CMYK swatch. Add swatch. Right. So I'm just adding now swatches. Now if I open up my swatches, they're there. Let's actually bring this back over here. Okay. And any of these things, just like in any of the Adobe products, any of your palettes that if they're free floating can be docked. So you can see I can pull that out. It's free floating. If I grab the top of it and drag it back into here, I can dock it into this panel over here. Okay, so that's kind of a little bit of getting around, a little bit of maneuvering in here. And again, there's same kind of things with Command plus zooms in. The space bar allows me to pan across and move it. If I want to zoom out or if I want to get back to fit to page, it's Command 0. And those are kind of just some simple things kind of getting around. Pages palette we'll use a lot. We'll go over more of these in details, but those are kind of the real basics of getting around inside of InDesign. Now, I did want to show you the difference between, you can see how I have 2 pages here. Let's add a 3rd page, and you can see their individual pages. If I want, so let's just do new document, and let's say I want 3 pages, right? Let's change this to 3, but I'm going to change this to facing pages. Everything else is going to be, right, we'll make sure we do that. Okay, go ahead and do create. Now, as you can see, there is 1 page here that has a spine and 2 inner pages. What that is mimicking is the idea if you were making a book, that first page is going to be what's called right facing, which means it's on the right side of the page, and that would be the first page, and then you get the spreads on the inside, and then as I create pages, you can see it creates little spreads out of it. Useful if you're making a magazine and book, not useful if you want to do single pages. Right, so I recommend not doing facing pages if you want to just make either posters or flyers or whatever that is. Right, so that's just a real basic kind of just maneuvering around InDesign. I do have other tutorials about the very specific things inside of InDesign.